This video is brought to you by Honey. It's been 20 years since The Sopranos graced our televisions, and to celebrate, I decided that I'd watch it for the first time. I'd always been meaning to see the show, and with the added motivation of covering the PS2 game afterwards, I finally got around to it, and I absolutely loved it, which shouldn't surprise anyone who's seen it. But the video game, named The Sopranos Road to Respect, is terrible, which shouldn't surprise anyone who's played it, or even anyone who knows about it, as it sits at a generally unfavorable 42 on Metacritic, which, on a video game review score scale, is basically rubbish, and the user score throws the rubbish right into the bin with a 38. Now, normally I make a point on this channel to try and avoid games that just straight up suck, or at least completely uninteresting. And I'm not going to pull out the rug from underneath you and act as if this is like some sort of hidden gem or anything. Like, this really does suck, but I find it to be a fascinating project in some ways, both because it has some ideas and ambitions that are worth exploring, and because its failures are just so garish. Oh, and this game's really hard to talk about without spoiling the show, so consider this to be a spoiler warning. Before I first booted up the game, I came across a 22-minute behind-the-scenes video that came with the limited edition, which, by the way, though it was just a sleeve, this has far better box art than the awkward-looking regular release with its giant Uncanny Valley Gandolfini. I liked this video because it was cool to see that so much of the cast returned for this. Alongside Tony, the actors for Christopher, Silvio, Paulie, Vito, Big Pussy, and even AJ reprise their roles here, and they do a really great job as voice actors, which I'd say is a testament to just how talented that cast was. Especially Gandolfini himself, who really gets into it and gives it his all.
Uncle Tony?
Are you fucking kidding me? Pulling a stunt like that on his street?
It was just sitting there. What do you care?
Fucking street punks, snatching purses from old ladies. Christ, the pussy was here to see this shit.
The rest of the characters in the game are all original characters, which I think is a good decision because the show's characters and actors are just so good and just so iconic that they can't really be impersonated, so I'm glad that they didn't try. There is one scene where Artie is suspiciously not at Vesuvio when he obviously should have been there, and there's another scene where Hesh is sitting around but he's unavailable to talk to, but the trade-off is worth it, I think. The other thing I got out of this video is that the developers seem to genuinely be at least a bit excited by and into the game. I mean, like, okay, I'm not so naive. I know it's probably all just like a big promotional lie, and knowing what was eventually released, it likely was, but listening to them talk about how they just wanted to do the show justice and it was important to them to make it all seem authentic was kind of endearing to me. It had been an understatement to say that I play a lot of these licensed games, and to me it seemed like these guys at least knew the ingredients for making a good one. Which isn't surprising because they were mainly a developer of tie-in games. Founded in 1999, 7 studios had worked with the Fantastic Four, the Pirates of the Caribbean, the Shrek, and the Charlie's Angels licenses before this. It's also unsurprising that they didn't handle those well either. May of 2006 saw the Sopranos game quietly announced in a press release with both THQ and HBO collaborating as publishers, with the game set to release on the PS2 and the relatively new Xbox 360. Publications covering this announcement already weren't really giving the game a chance. The 360 version of the game was cancelled late in development without reason, so we ended up with just this PS2 game, which was released in November of 2006, between the two halves of the final season. Despite this, it's actually set between seasons 5 and 6, where you play as a guy named Joey LaRocca, the illegitimate son of Big Pussy Bompanciero, and you're a low-level gangster in the Soprano family. Joey isn't mentioned or acknowledged anywhere in the show, and he's a character purely made up for this game. Make of that what you will. Upon release, series creator David Chase said that while he hopes the game is fun and entertaining and feels like the show, he himself didn't actually want a game to be made, so he made sure that there was no real cross-pollination between the two. The game opens with one of its 2 pre-rendered cutscenes, which sees Joey stealing a purse and tripping over Tony outside Satriali's. Quite the character introduction. Tony scolds him and acknowledges that Pussy would have hated to see him like this, so he offers him some work for the family, and off we go. Also, Tony looks incredibly creepy here. Thankfully, characters somehow look a lot more natural in-engine as the game cuts to outside the Bing, where Silvio is ordering Joey to beat up some misbehaving dude, so you get a very brief taste of the fighting system. You might have also noticed that this looks a lot more high-def than your average PS2 game because I'm hardware upscaling it in an emulator, which is by far the best way to play this game if you have a nice enough PC because it even improves the frame rate. You then enter the Bing and you're treated to some polygonal PS2 nudity. How scandalous. It starts with this really awkward panning shot of a stripper who asks you to change the music for her, so you get the music guy to change the music, and then she gives you a lap dance as a reward. It's a super juvenile first impression, and it's really only a taste of what's to come. Otherwise, they've done a really impressive and respectable job with the Bing here. You can wander around and have little chats with everyone, and it's fantastic how they've captured the look of the place with the neon lights and the reflections, and it's all supported by a really impressive licensed soundtrack which mixes genres and mixes popular artists like Motley Crue and Queens of the Stone Age and Iggy Pop and Slipknot with some more lesser known acts. And this music only ever plays on the speakers in the game, which is an interesting decision in the name of realism that I think would work better if there were simply more speakers in the game. All too often it's just completely silent where it could have had some tunes, but it's cool when it works. In general, this game is actually a really, dare I say it, graphically impressive PS2 game, which I think is to be expected as it was also being developed for the 360. Like, upscaled, this straight up almost looks like a launch era 360 game at times, which is really, really impressive. At the Bing, you can also go outside and go out the back and see the VIP bar, and a really great looking render of the back office complete with cast members to chat to. It's a real treat. At this point, I was thinking that, this game can't possibly be that bad. Clearly effort has gone into it, and it's really quite charming with all the cast and the movie sets. As a longtime fan of the show, going back about 4 months, I felt really pandered to in a really, really good way. The dialogue writing might only be passable, but the voice acting really saves it, and they even included some neat little details like that singing fish on the wall that you can even turn on. Later you can play poker with the gang, and though it's pretty basic, it's a really novel thing to include for fans. After collecting everyone's food orders, Paulie asks you to beat up a guy in the bathroom, so you QTE his head into a urinal and accidentally kill him. The next level sees you dumping the body at the docks, but you kill multiple people just to dump the one body, which I don't know much about the criminal underworld, but it just doesn't seem particularly smart. I even choked out a homeless guy just for being annoying, I guess. So what's this combat actually like? On paper, it's a pretty standard third-person beat 'em up. You have a light attack, a heavy attack, a grab, and a block. You can pick up weapons to use, you can do finisher animations on enemies when they're low, and you can use parts of the environment to finish guys off. It's nothing you haven't seen before, and it's nothing that hasn't been done before in a fun and satisfying way. But this has been completely butchered, and it's honestly where the game completely falls apart because it's just so unresponsive and horrible feeling. There seems to be frames where your button presses just don't work, and sometimes you won't pick up weapons when you're near them, but you'll still play out the picking up animation, and don't get me started on the enemies grappling you. They seem to just be able to forcibly grab you at any time where you need to button mash your way out, but they can just throw you to the ground immediately after grabbing you, and no amount of angry button mashing will stop them. The idea of mashing your way out of a grapple is fine, but it seems like when enemies are playing out their punching animation, it doesn't register anything you're doing, and they can just continuously attack without any gaps in between. So you're constantly getting grabbed, thrown to the ground, and pummeled with zero ways of avoiding it. Despite this, the game isn't challenging. It's absolutely frustrating, but only because it just wastes your time so much. You can get stun locked for a good 20 seconds at times before you have any control, and enemies just take so long to take down unless you use a weapon. Weapons actually finish enemies off really quickly, weirdly quickly even, but you need to risk running away from combat and letting the pickup animation play out, which will more often than not just get you stun locked again before you pick up the weapon, especially considering sometimes you just won't even pick it up even if you have time. And different weapons swing at different speeds, so the slower ones often aren't at all worth considering. And you can't bring weapons into a fight because you drop them after each fight ends, and you have to pick them up before each fight starts, which makes no sense at all. You might be noticing this gun icon in the corner. You do actually have a pistol in this game that you can use pretty much whenever you want, and while it controls a little awkwardly, it's just a simple lock-on and shoot system, but if you're in public and you choose to use it, it will up your heat level and you'll quickly get an instant game over as the gang instantly kills you in the game's other pre-rendered cutscene. You'll need to pay off poorly between missions to get your heat level back down if you do choose to use it. But the thing is, it isn't even worth using if you want to because it takes forever to take anyone down. Enemies just take gunshot after gunshot on the chin, so you're better off trying to find a weapon pickup instead. Somehow a pool cue is more powerful than a pistol, and it's less risky. The whole system sounds cool on paper, but in practice they just didn't try to balance it at all. Why not just make the pistol a one-shot kill weapon since it's so punishing to use it anyway? The docks level ends with Joey awkwardly seeing a reflection of his father in the water, and he quickly says some vague stuff about how all choices in life are bad. Now, Big Pussy is one of the more iconic characters in The Sopranos, and he had one of the more tragic and memorable deaths in this series, so I was at least partly interested in seeing exactly what they were doing with him here and where this will all go by the game's end. So far, we've had a lap dance, accidentally killed a guy, and killed a bunch of other guys just to dispose of the first guy. And this opening is in some ways indicative and sort of sums up the frantic and chaotic jumble of missions in this game. It reminded me of Grand Theft Auto in that sort of like every mission is just a random task with a random twist that's a bit too quirky to be believable. There's a lot of doing tasks for people above you, which makes sense as a gangster, but it never really feels like it's going anywhere. A big chunk of the game is dedicated to a subplot with AJ, which begins with you helping as a bouncer for a party he's organising, and the first part of this mission is one of the more coherent parts of the game as you make your way back and forth around this party, stopping fights and drama from breaking out, ironically by fighting a lot yourself. But it just gets way too stupid. AJ gets caught up with another gang, so they literally stab and kill his friend before his eyes, and his car gets stolen. Now, I know AJ went through some really dark stuff in the show, but you would think that this would be a completely life-altering experience for him, all things considered, but of course this game is completely ignored by the show. You can't just go from Season 5 to this game to Season 6 like you're supposed to, and feel like there's any real continuity to it. Another mission has you in a rival gang's adult film production studio, and it does this whole bit where you walk in and the actresses think you're part of the shoot, only for you to break it up and beat up the crew members with a giant purple dildo. I guess this is the game's failed attempt at being humorous, and again it feels way more like the bad quirky bits in GTA rather than anything to do with The Sopranos. Like, I must say I was really questioning my life choices at this point. And this humor, like across the board, is just really juvenile and awful. At one point you get invited into a hotel room to sleep with an adult worker, but you don't because you find out she's unconscious, and the game just like plays it off as a gag, I guess. Like, it's really hard to tell, and it's never brought up again. Like what is this absolute trash? In another part of the game, you walk into a hospital bathroom, a guy using the urinal asks you to leave, you call him a piss boy, and then you beat him to the ground.
Hey, pal, you mind leaving?
Fuck you, piss boy.
I said get the hell out.
So you can go pee-pee in a cup? Not happening.
This is one of the many flimsy excuses the game has for getting you into endless fistfight after fistfight. Like, this hospital scene should have been a sad, quiet moment which sees AJ bedridden after getting threatened with a knife and choked out, which again is just completely insane in itself, but instead every second room you walk into has strangers wanting to fight. You beat up nurses and pharmacists and anyone who looks at you the wrong way. It's just insane. Like, one mission has you knock over a porta potty that has an innocent security guard in it, and then you slam his face into the asphalt and excrement. It's hard to tell if this is trying to be edgy or funny or dark or outrageous. It just comes across as juvenile and confused with its own tone. To play devil's advocate, at least these levels try to be a bit more dynamic and varied with their storytelling. Like, there's one level where you're meant to get back AJ's stolen car from a mechanic, and you just walk through endless garages beating up copy-paste enemies, and it's just kind of straight up depressing. It's one of the many places that could use some music, but it just doesn't. They have this great licensed soundtrack, but we just get this eerie, depressing silence footnoting the worst beat-em-up system ever. You may have noticed that this game has a conversation system where you can at moments choose to respond in a tough, neutral, or smooth manner, and it's mostly inconsequential beyond just a line or two of dialogue, but I did notice that it can be at times used to avoid fighting, usually with the smooth option, and since fighting is the boringest thing ever and basically the only thing you do in this stupid game, I picked the smooth option almost every time. Now, I've been rambling for a while now about how just awful this game is, and it is truly repugnant, so let's take a quick breather to remember exactly what is so great about The Sopranos. It's been about a month now since I finished up with the show, and among my post-TV show depression, I questioned why I even enjoyed it so much. I mean, after all, it's really slow and it's at times mundane, but As cliche as it sounds, I found it to be super realistic and immersive. The acting is just that good, and the dialogue understood how people banter and talk over each other, and the show being in some ways even more about Tony the family man rather than Tony the mob boss really draws you into the world through these relatable, simple moments where it's just a family like bickering in their kitchen in the morning before school. Now, the game on the other hand doesn't try to get into any personal life stuff with Joey beyond his father, like you don't even get to see his home, and that's fine in concept. I'm cool with the game attempting to focus on the low-level jobs in The Sopranos. What I was really surprised and impressed by though is that the game actually did try to recreate these realistic areas with people just hanging out and doing their thing. Between each mission you return to the Bing, Vesuvios or Satriales, and just like the Bing, Vesuvios and Satriales both look and feel exceptional. It's again novel seeing the show's cast hanging out, and the developers went on set and built the levels based on blueprints and built the textures based off photos. At times, the game can be really pleasing as a fan of the show. And this realistic design is extended into the regular levels. When you're not endlessly beating everyone up, you can just see people hanging out at a hospital or at a gym or a hotel or a party, and it's pulled off really, really well with people chatting and playing games and working out or whatever they're doing. You can even interact with basically anyone you want, though I'd advise against it because it ends up in a random fight all too often, but it's still just interesting to me that they've tried to recreate and capture this realistic atmosphere and world with all these moments. And they would succeed if they didn't undercut themselves with some shocking writing and stupid combat. But again, the voice acting is really, really good when it comes to the show's cast, but it's often bad otherwise. And the writing is weird in that it ranges from decent at its best to just downright awful at its worst, which can kind of be said for the whole game in a way. Like, it can be decent at times, but usually it's downright awful. Like, take the level design for example. It can often feel like they've designed each location realistically, which I really appreciate as another attempt to capture the realism of the show, but then they'll have a level like that car mechanic, which I guess is the most random and large collection of garages that there ever was. There's just no consistency. My absolute favorite moment in the entire game is this simple little vignette of a scene at Vesuvios where you're attending a bar mitzvah and they've built this warm little environment where there's no juvenile jokes and there's just a bunch of people hanging out and chatting. All the dialogue is realistic small talk and there's music playing and you can even awkwardly dance with the kids if you want to. It's really an awkward PS2 scene all around, but it's also really sweet in a way, and I think it represents The Sopranos more than any other scene in the game. There's also a part in this scene where Joey sees his father in the bathroom reflection, which happens occasionally throughout the game. He just pops up briefly to lightly roast Joey for getting in with the crime family every now and again. I guess this is one way of having the show's dreamlike surrealism materialize in the game. At the end, you do get some form of closure. After beating an enemy mob boss, Joey's rewarded by pressing X to get made. After all, this is The Sopranos' road to respect, and it's been a bumpy road at that. But before this, Joey chats to all the crew and chats one last time with his father. So how does an iconic character who was murdered by his own best friends react to his son joining those very friends' gang? How does a character who was purposefully left without any closure finally get to share his thoughts on what happened? Well, he's proud of Joey for getting made, and he seems completely chill about it all. Amazing.
Hey, I wish things were different, but you working with my best friends on Earth, like a fucking dream come true.
I thought you might be bitter.
Bitter? No, just forget about it. Go enjoy yourself.
The Sopranos' road to respect is mostly deplorable, but it's a fascinating attempt at adapting the show, and being only 4 hours long, I guess it's at least not completely uninteresting. I saw someone describe this game online as feeling like one of Christopher's screenplays, and I think that that's apt. It's a bumbling mess that occasionally shows some signs and flashes of a good game before hitting you over the head with its obnoxiousness. It's so close, yet it's so far. You know what else is close? Savings. Honey is a completely free browser extension that automatically finds promo codes when you're buying stuff online. I was using it way before this sponsorship, and it saved me money when buying stuff for this channel, and it really is a great extension that I was recommending to people anyway. Your average user saves over $28 US, and it's super easy to install, so go to joinhoney.com/ref/minimme or click the link in the description and give it a crack. It's completely free. Each install helps out the channel immensely. And with that, we cap off another video. hope you enjoyed it. It'll be interesting to me to see how well this video does just in terms of like analytics, like performance-wise in terms of views and stuff, just because I doubt a lot of my subscriber base are Sopranos fans. Like everyone who I know who's seen The Sopranos is like way older than I am. So I hope this video, you know, reaches the Sopranos fans out there. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it. You know, subscribe, click the bell. I hate saying that, but it helps a lot. And you know, leave a comment, like, whatever, all that stuff helps. What else? Another thing that helps is Patreon. So I'd like to take a moment to thank all my patrons, including the ones coming up on the screen right now, and especially including Balmain Components, Boggy Online, Brighton Robinson, Caden the Dingo, Devin Grant Dahl, Dominic Chikoki, eBay Scammer Brad, Evil Chicken, Homer821, Casey, Labcat, Lucas Ray Sevic, Magnus Ikomo Stavik, Mattias Bayes, Maximilian Kunzman, May Aris, Mizaki, Melanie G. Minimme questions his life choices whenever he reads these names. It's true. Mrs. Minimme, Mustache Duct Tape, Peaceful Kumquat, Review Disney Planes, Riverside Renegade, The Mighty Mega Link, Thomas Damsgaard, Tommy Carver Chaplin, Trixie Emerson, Under 10 Hours, Writing on Games, and Zindictive. I appreciate all of you. Yeah, thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all next time.